An absolutely epic clash awaits us. It's Praggnanandhaa who takes fort. He is going to play with the white pieces against Hikaru Nakamura. Praggnanandhaa adjusts his pieces. He has the white pieces, and Hikaru is someone who he has some experience playing against. At the World Cup 2023, it was Pragg who had eliminated Hikaru. And in the first time that they played here, the game had ended in a very solid draw. Both of them are on 5.5 points out of 10, which means that they are half a point behind the leaders and they need to push a bit. There you have Hikaru coming in with a Starbucks coffee, shakes hands with Pragg and gets ready. Hikaru also adjusts his pieces. This is going to be such an amazing clash. It's also clash of generations. Pragg is exactly half the age of Hikaru. Hikaru is 36 years old and Pragg is 18 years old. There you have Evgeny Barev, one of the finest players of Canada, coming in and making the first move. And what is very interesting to notice is that Pragg has asked him to play d4. Is this move going to be played, kept on the board? There we have shake of hands. Is Pragg going to take the move back? He touches the pawn and presses the clock. So d4, this is the first game that Pragg has played d4. He has gone e4 in all other games. Hikaru responds back with d5. And Pragg brings his knight out to f3. And what is Hikaru going to do now? Because you also have to take into consideration that Pragg can play the London system. So knight f6 played here. And Pragg goes c4. Yes, we have the queen's gambit on the board. Will Hikaru go e6? Will he go c6? The Slav. Whoa, he goes c5. This is not as common as the other moves. We have some kind of a square that is built up here and Hikaru gets up and starts moving around. That just shows confidence. Pragg takes on d5, but after 10 minutes of thought. This line has been played a lot by Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. It is maybe not as popular as other lines of Queen's Gambit and so on, but it's very logical because you have now kind of liquidated the center and Pragg takes with the queen. Hikaru has to take it back. If you take with the knight, there is e4, kicking the knight away. So that's the reason why he takes with the queen. And now Pragg, what is the move that he's going to play? He goes knight to c3. Very logical, attacking the queen. The queen takes it and knight takes queen. Already the opening has been slightly successful for Hikaru because he has a 16-minute time lead. a6 played very quickly. While Pragg has to kind of figure all of this out over the board. Yes, white has a small lead in development because the two knights are out and he plays the move g3 after 3 minutes of thought, and Hikaru, still in his prep, plays e5. Generally, when you are well prepared in the opening, it not only saves you time, but it also saves you sort of thinking effort. You no longer have to think for each and every move. You're moving quickly. So knight b3 played. For now, Pragg is playing the main line. Knight comes to c6. This knight could jump to b4, could jump to d4, but anyway, it's well placed there. Pragg develops his bishop. Look at this bishop. It's such a pretty one on the long diagonal. Wonderful piece here. And although Pragg was not well prepared, a5 played. He has gotten a good position. Now a5, the point is to push a4 here. And maybe knight a4 is an option. Pragg now is out of his prep for quite some time, but thinks a lot and plays knight b5. Meanwhile, Hikaru still in his prep. This threatens knight c7 check to win the rook. And Hikaru very quickly gives a check once again. He's not even used 10 minutes of his time, while Pragg has used more than 45 minutes. Bishop d2 played. And now you have to take care of this check. So either you castle or you put your king on e7. Hikaru thinks his king is much better placed in the center and plays king e7. Good move there by Hikaru Nakamura. And now Praggnanandhaa, what is he going to do? He asks the bishop to clarify the situation. And so now you have to take. So Hikaru takes on d2. You can take with the king, but that would not be very helpful. So he takes with the knight. And now this knight can actually jump to c4. And look at all these sort of weakened squares. So that is what Pragg is banking upon. That his knight could come to c4. Hikaru pushes his pawn to a4. And gains more space and kind of clamps down both these pawns. Pragg puts his knight on c4. And now he is looking here, as we said, to b6 square. And he goes bishop to e6. Nice little move. The thing is, you can't take here after taking on c6 because there's no time. This is hanging here. So that's the reason why after bishop e6, he goes rook to c1. That's a nice move, defending this knight. But now Hikaru has a very powerful move. Let's see if he finds it, because yes, this knight is looking at the b6 square, but Hikaru's move, rook a6, what a fantastic move. The rook controls this square and also defends the knight from any bishop takes c6. For example, if you take here, I can take with the rook and you are in trouble as this is pinned. So Pragg now castles it out. And will Hikaru now simply take the open file with his rook on d8? That seems like a very logical move. Somehow Hikaru has managed to keep his time lead. He goes rook d8 with 1 hour 20 minutes on the clock. Pragg is down to 46 minutes. And he brings his knight to e3. Okay, interesting. Can we actually jump in here with our rook to d2? Actually, it's not at all a bad move and could be played. But Hikaru plays rook a5 and attacks the knight. The knight can come back for sure to c3. But then you have to tackle with knight d4, which is pretty strong. So Pragg takes on c6. The move is not particularly great because you're giving up your strong bishop. But in return, Pragg has weakened the square on c6. And so now knight comes back to c3. And can Hikaru simply jump in with his rook to d2? Well, he could have, but you know, to rook d2 there was rook c2 coming in, and that's the reason why bishop b3 is played to take advantage of that. And Pragg plays a very interesting backward move, because now d2 is covered and he's also attacking c6 pawn. So very positional backward move. Hikaru goes back to c6, and in a way this knight on b1 does a very important job of defending this on d2. He plays his pawn to f4 now, pushing the pawn. Hikaru pushes it forward with e4, and now Pragg brings his king into the game. So slowly and steadily Pragg is fighting here. He wants the full point. He thinks he's doing well. Hikaru plays his rook to b6. Again, a useful move because later on this rook could attack the b2 pawn. And now a good way to draw is rook c5, bishop d5, rook c2, bishop b3, rook c5, and they can just repeat. But instead Pragg plays knight c3. And he's just improving the position of his knight. But where exactly is this knight going is not so clear. Hikaru plays g6, a useful move to stop knight f5 checks. Also, when you move the knight, f5 can be played later on. And he goes rook b1. Now, when you have to play a move like rook b1, it's definitely nothing to be very happy about, you know. And so now Hikaru plays knight d5. I really love this move. There is knight e4 here possible because after take, There's bishop c2 and then I chop off this pawn, and black is doing well. So that's the reason why Pragg goes rook c1 back. And now Hikaru pushes his pawn to f5, and you can see that black has space, pieces are well positioned. Later this rook can enter d2, this rook is looking at b2. So a lot of things happening here. g4 played by Pragg, f takes g4 by Hikaru. He takes the pawn, also attacking the f4 pawn. Have to be careful now. Knight takes g4 must be taken. So he plays, yes, knight takes g4. The position is still holdable, but Pragg is down to 10 minutes with 12 moves to make, while Hikaru has 25 minutes. So Hikaru has also managed his time really well. Knight takes f4 played, and again if you take here knight takes e4, then rook f8 is a big trouble here, because then the knight just jumps and gives a check. So he plays the move king e3. He brings his king up. By the way, king e1 was the most staunch defense here. Very difficult to find. King e3 more logical, hitting the knight and the pawn. And Hikaru needs to move the knight away from f4. He takes his time for this move and plays knight d5 check. And again the point is, if you take here, I take back with the bishop, rook b3 coming, b2 is hanging. So that's the reason why now Hikaru takes on, after king e4, he takes on c3, because Pragg's king in the center is not. By the way, c5 was even stronger, threatening rook e6 check, but he takes, and Pragg now takes back with the pawn, because if he takes with the rook, then there is check and you lose the b2 pawn. So he wants to take with the pawn here, but his structure is just terrible. c5 played, and the idea is to actually play rook e6 check next. Rook f4 played by Praggnanandhaa. Maybe not the best move, but a very logical one, because you want to make space for your king to go back here into the home territory. Bishop d5 check, king e3, and now Hikaru pushes his pawn to h5. Very interesting to note that if you go to f2, there's check and it's game over. If you go king d2, there is bishop b3, there is g5 possible, but if you play king d3, by the way, bishop b3 is checkmate. So anyway, let's go back to the game. c4, and Hikaru goes back bishop a8, and Pragg now puts his knight in the corner, because that's the only square he can go to, but the knight can now be trapped, and that's exactly what Hikaru is trying to achieve. He goes for a check, and after king f2, rook f6 played to trade off the rooks, and also now not letting any rook f7 or knight f7 business coming in. So king goes to g3, and now it's time to round up the piece here with rook h8. Will Hikaru play it? This game has really turned out terribly for Praggnanandhaa, because with the white pieces, to land in such a position itself is quite a bad sign. But now Hikaru is converting this confidently. Rook takes on f4, and now king takes f4, rook check. Now important moment in the game, because you can play king g5, but then there's a fork, so king g7 makes a lot of sense. He plays now knight f5, because the knight was anyway trapped. If you had gone to knight f7, there was rook f8 pinning here, so that's the reason why here pawn takes, rook takes, and we have crossed 40 moves now. This is the 41st move, so Pragg got up. Hikaru, as always, has a lot of time on the clock. He plays his rook to c file, and now Praggnanandhaa can take the pawn on h5. So he takes it. So white has 2 pawns for the piece, but I don't think that's going to be enough. The black bishop is very, very strong. We have to learn from Hikaru how to convert this. because here you have to be slightly patient. First he locates that he needs to win this pawn, so he goes bishop b7. Next move he'll go bishop a6 and he will take this pawn. So king f4 played here by Pragg, and now bishop a6. He plays his king to e5. King goes to g6, attacking the rook. Well, the point was, if you take here, maybe there is king d6, and this is what Hikaru didn't want. He loses his c5 pawn. So first king g6, and after rook h4 by Pragg, where he defends the pawn, maybe king g5. Yes, he attacks the rook even further, and rook does not have a good square to go on the 4th rank, so it went back to the 3rd rank. And so now Hikaru needs to figure out what is the way, but I think he can chop off the pawn. He takes it. Bishop takes c4 played, and Pragg goes rook g3 check. He has to also be cut off now. King goes to h6. So e4 played here by Pragg, using his e pawn as a passer to create some play. He goes rook to c6. And now Pragg moves his king to f5. It's only a matter of time before black's pieces start to coordinate. Bishop f7 played, just in case any attack could come in. And now the c pawn is ready to roll. So he goes king e5. This pawn can simply move forward, but if you play c4, there will be king d4. But he does play c4. Can king d4 be played? Yes, he plays it. Now what has Hikaru done to king d4? Already given a check. Maybe he wants to give a check here on d6. Yes, he plays a check. The king has to move. Plays king c5, but now can go rook d3 just to create this problem. So yes, he plays it, rook d3, and now the rook will get traded, or a3 is weak. King b4 would be a good idea, attacking the pawn on a4. And now Pragg has to decide. He's played king b4, so Hikaru's move. He's thinking calmly here, but gives a check. I think that's the best move here, because you are not letting the white king take part in this battle. It has to take the pawn on a4. And now maybe the most logical way is to take the rook and play c3. I think Hikaru is just calculating the final phase of the game. Takes, and he resigns, because after hg3 you have c3, and because the pawn controls, bishop controls the square, this pawn cannot be stopped. And there you have Hikaru scoring a very important win here, thereby going up to 6.5 out of 10 and out of 11, and just half a point behind Jan Nepomniachtchi. On 6.5 now there is Gukesh and also Hikaru, who's reached there.